Decolonizing parenting. Now, that's a phrase you don't hear every day, but it's a crucial concept all of us, especially Black households, should take a closer look at. Let's take a quick trip down memory lane. When you think about your own childhood, what flashes into your mind? For some of us, it might trigger memories of getting let's just say, a more than stern talking to, or a good whopping on the backside. But let's be real. Where did these tactics come from? Do they really work? And is there some deep-rooted stuff, like generational trauma, that we really need to unpack here? Well, I'm Darren from PushBlack, and you're tuned into Black History Year. Parenting, man. Look, it ain't easy, especially when you think about raising a Black child in a world where we're too often dehumanized. That's why today's talk is so important, because we're getting into breaking down generational trauma and, yes, decolonizing how we parent. And we got the amazing Yolanda Williams here to talk about it all. Now, Yolanda is a racial justice educator, conscious parenting coach, and the brains behind Parenting Decolonized. Through her work, she guides parents to divest from white supremacy and nurture liberated, independent, and emotionally solid children. Get ready. We're about to unearth the historical legacies that have shaped today's parenting practices, for better and for worse. So stick around for a truly transformative conversation. What's up, fam? Before we dive into the episode, I have one small favor to ask. Please spread the word about Black History Year on social media. Podcasting is competitive, y'all, and the best way to grow is through your promotion. You can shout out this episode or share one lesson from it you found super interesting. Just tag us at We Are PushBlack on Instagram and TikTok so more folks can access the Black history they didn't teach us in school. Your support means the world to us, and your minute of effort makes our hours of work worth it. So thank you, fam. Now, let's get back to the show. Hey, how you doing today, Yolanda?
Oh, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm okay. Thank you so much for meeting with us. Appreciate you taking time to speak with us today about decolonizing parenting and conscious parenting. But before we dive into the weeds, we like to start our conversations with a pretty broad question. We want to know, from your perspective, Yolanda, what does Black liberation look like to you?
For me, Black liberation looks like when we center the most marginalized of all of us, which is a dark-skinned, Black, trans child. We center their needs first. All of us are free. So if you think about what that child would need to be liberated, if we center those needs, then education, policies, political policies, environmental stuff, like all of that stuff will set us free. And it just looks like, and it feels like, and it sounds like joy.
Yolanda, I love that response so much. If you could say more about just the sound of joy, what were you saying there in terms of what Black liberation?
I mean, when we think about kids, the thing is, we're going to get into the subject when we get more into the podcast. But when we think about children, a lot of adults just don't like the sound of them. They really just don't. And when we talk about Black liberation, if we're not attaching child liberation to that, then it's incomplete. So when we got to think about, as adults, like the sound of laughter, the sound of giggling, the sound of being silly, right? Like we lose some of that, especially as we're battered down by these systems. But Black kids, when they're just allowed to be children, they are, it's a beautiful sight and it's a beautiful sound. And that's when I think about Black liberation, that's what I hear. And I feel like people who are open, who haven't been bogged down by racism and capitalism. And so they are vulnerable without it feeling transactional. It feels free.
Absolutely. I just want to drop this quote real quick because I find it pairs well with your response here. There's a quote from a Irish revolutionary named Bobby Sands. He says, "Our revenge will be the laughter of our children." And that's something I've always held on to and lived by. Often we think revolution and liberation has to be bloody, this big spectacle, but just focusing in on the joy, that infectious joy and energy that comes from children, and specifically the laughter as well, is something we all need more in our lives. So thank you so much for that rich response, Yolanda.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. So we want to jump right into the history, but we're going to start really broad, really general. I'm wondering if you could, for us, Yolanda, if you could just describe in general what Black parenting practices look like today, and what cultural or historical and societal factors have kind of influenced or shaped Black parenting practices over time.
The thing is about today's parenting is it's like a mixed bag because more people are realizing the harm of old school parenting, right? A lot of us grew up in environments where physical uh you was getting whoopings, okay? You was getting hit upside the head, popped, and a child's supposed to stay in their place. You're not supposed to ask why. And so a lot of people grew up in that way. I know I was one of them. And so understanding that I didn't want my daughter to grow up with the same issues I grew up with, I switched. I think a lot of people are starting to see the damage, and not just within themselves, but collectively, that parenting that way has historically, damaged our uh, the Black collective. And so I feel like there's a lot more people coming over to the side of conscious parenting, but there's still a large amount of people that cannot handle when a child is being human.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of that. And we see it all over the internet, all day, every day. A child is just doing something like asking a question, advocating for themselves, and people lose their damn minds over it.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. You said a phrase earlier, a child to stay at a child's place. Makes me think about how
Mhm.
hierarchy was introduced into just familiar structures. But also just thinking about whoopings, as it relates to Black parenting, I'm sure we all may personally have a memory of this, or we've certainly heard a story of having to go pick out a switch, how
Yeah.
ingrained that seems to be in just like the Black collective imaginary. But often, when we talk about decolonizing parenting and conscious parenting, there's this
Mhm.
pushback, there's this assumption that violence has always been a part of like Black child rearing throughout history, even in pre-colonial Africa. What do you think about that? Do you feel like that's true at all? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big old historian, and somebody that I followed for a while, Stacey Patton,
Yes.
she talks about this in depth, and she talks about how there's no evidence that pre-colonial Africans used, punitive physical punishment on their children. And even now, when you look at like hunter-gatherer tribes across the continent of Africa, they aren't hitting their children.
Mm,
They have what people call attachment parenting, or white folks call attachment parenting, when really it's conscious parenting. It's authoritative parenting, and that just is you're allowing your child to be human.
mhm,
I mean, that's just the gist of it. You're not trying to control. There's this saying talking about a carpenter and a gardener, and carpenters, they shape and they build and they control. They're very controlling about what they're building, right? It's supposed to come out with this exact product. But gardeners, they nurture the plant. They plant the seed, they water it, they nurture it, but the plant is going to grow how it's going to grow, right?
mhm,
Someone else, and I forget her name, and I'm sorry about this. She talked about how we need to let kids be wildflowers, because when you think about a wildflower, there's no cultivating.
mm,
They are wild, and nature just is able to do its thing, right? And as parents, you're not supposed to be hands off, but we cannot keep looking at our children like our property, like they don't have, like they're empty vessels, and we just open up the tops of their heads and pour in knowledge. Like that
mhm,
is a colonial construct. Thinking that children are empty vessels is a colonizer's mindset around children, and it is not an indigenous mindset at all. And so when you think about like how far removed and what was interrupted, it actually angers me so much, because what we have been indoctrinated into is the violence. We're not inherently violent. It's them folks over there that was putting people on racks and pulling them apart
yeah.
that were violent over there across the pond, right? And
Mhm,
so they brought that over here and brought people over here. And you think about who was brought over here with the age range of the enslaved people that was kidnapped. They weren't people who were old. These were young people. And so when you think about um, chattel slavery and how these people were basically I'm sure they tried to hang on to as much as they could around their indigenous African culture. But when you are bathed in violence and torture and dehumanization, there's something that happens to your brain, and you kind of had to adapt to that situation. And that adaptation has been the severe punishment of our children, the physical punishment, the degradation, denigrating them, making them feel like they're not good enough all the time, being snarky, being sarcastic.
Mhm.
And that has been the hallmark of Black parenting. But there's so many of us who don't parent that way. And I cannot stand that that's a stereotype.
Yeah.
Like, you ask anybody, what's the think about a Black parent, what do you think about? You know what they're going to say.
Mhm.
And that's terrible.
Yes, indeed. And we absolutely going to dig into that, just stereotypes around Black parenting, where that comes from, specifically in the media. I personally have a gripe with Black comedians who've been harping on this for like decades.
Yeah.
That's how Black people parent, that's how white people parent. But we'll take that just for now. But you lifted up so much rich information and history for us here. I just want to kind of pull that out a bit. So across the pond in Europe, how they treated children, or even how they seen children, was totally different from a spiritual standpoint, a social standpoint. And I just want to lift up this one quote from this Economist article titled, "In the Middle Ages, there was no such thing as childhood." They tell us that in European history, children were often treated as miniature adults throughout the Middle Ages. And this meant that more was expected of them, and they were not given more privileges. Children were often depicted as miniature adults in medieval works of art. But this also shaped how in which they were reared, how they were treated, right? Much more violent. And this really contrasts with the way that pre-colonial African societies really understood children, specifically recognizing the spiritual value of children, understanding what they come into the world with. They're not just this empty vessel that you mentioned earlier, just in. They're their own people. The last thing I want to say on this, just to put a cap on it, there's this African proverb that says, essentially, if you want to, it reminds me of the gardening metaphor you just brought up. They tell us that instead of just treating the seed, we should treat the soil, right? We should treat the environment around a plant, right? Instead of just trying to cultivate them individually. So thank you so much for teasing it out for us. Now I want to talk about just a bit of a stickler issue for some folks. When we think about colonialism and enslavement, it's impossible to ignore the influence of Christianity, or I should say a certain framing of Christianity.
Yeah.
And here I'm thinking specifically of Proverbs 13 and 24, which says, "Spare the rod and spoil the child." How do you think this has been interpreted?
But it don't say that. It does not say that. Let's just keep it. It doesn't say that.
That's not.
It says, "He who spares the child, spares the rod, hateth the child." And so what the "spare the rod, spoil the child" is a poem. It's not even in the Bible. Okay. And so that has been, because there's all kinds of people want to get all sanctified when it comes to abusing children. And what pisses me off is, do you eat pork? Do you wear polyester? Do you eat shellfish? Because all that it's in the Bible to not do. Okay. Cussing, like all that is in the Bible to not do. So why are we picking and choosing out things to use in order to justify harming children? Like, that's always my question. That's number one. And number two, back to what you were saying about like across the pond and how they saw children. Well, they brought that on over here, right? And you got to think about they're not treating their children any better. Okay, there's I tell people all the time, when you really think about parenting, and folks always want to say like gentle parenting, that's a white people thing and whatnot. What pisses me off about that is ain't nothing gentle about white supremacy. There's absolutely nothing gentle about it. And white supremacy and religion and capitalism, all of that is like bad buddies. And so if we're really thinking about religion, we think about like the Protestants who came over here and how they had all of these philosophies around work, around children, around and hierarchy, patriarchy, that kind of stuff. All of that has to do, is not just the Christianity, it's not just the capitalism, it's all of them together that came from the 1400s. These people who also thought the world was flat. Like, can we evolve here? You feel me? Like, it doesn't make sense to be listening to folks who didn't have clear knowledge of stuff. We have more information now. The science has been clear for decades. And so for people to insist that just because it happened to them and they turned out fine, that all of a sudden that science is invalid. It doesn't make any sense anymore. That, to me, it doesn't, like, what do you want for the children? Do you want them to be under your thumb, or do you want them to thrive? Because you can't have both.
Yes, absolutely. This makes me think about what you mentioned earlier, how some folks believe their children are their property, like this owner. And I'm also thinking about familiar structures and how that shifted after colonialism. And more intensely for this conversation, I'm thinking about just gendered roles and how that got reshaped during this process, and how like the patriarch of the family was to be known, the disciplinarian. I'm curious how that lands with you, and also just this stereotype around Black familial structures. Just to give a little bit of history around where this is coming from, I'm pulling from this report, the Monahan report. This came out in the 70s during Richard Nixon's time in office, where he wanted to try to understand what was going on in the Black community. So he commissioned this sociology report. And Daniel Patrick Monahan, this old white guy, came back saying, like, hey, maybe the problems in the Black community are due to the problems in the Black familiar structure. We don't have Black fathers in the home that much. And because of that, Black mothers aren't equipped to rear children or to raise children. Now, this has totally been debunked plenty of times, most recently by the CDC, which has actually shown that Black fathers are more active than fathers of other races. But I'm just wondering how that stereotype lands with you, like the gendered roles, who's supposed to be the disciplinarian, and do you think familial structures should be considered when we think about conscious parenting?
So this is where I become a bit of a radical, because I do not think that I think the nuclear family is part of the problem. The nuclear family is another construct that was invented, right? And you think about, again, we go back into history. It wasn't a thing. The nuclear family was created for the sake of capitalism. And so when we think about the harm that's done to take people to basically extract them from community, put them into households where they have to fend for themselves and not get any help from anybody and just buy stuff to help them, and the damage that is done, it has nothing to do with Black mothers or Black fathers. Again, this all points back to systemic oppression, because the point of it all is for us to suffer. The point of it all is I'm not the one who said this, but I always say it. I'm not the one who thought of the quote, but the cruelty is the point. Because when you just tell people, like, hey, you got your home, and this one person is supposed to do this thing, this one person is supposed to do this thing, and you're not supposed to ask for help. You're supposed to just buy stuff to help you. We see now how that has been working out for everyone, and not just the Black people, but for everyone. Everyone is exhausted and miserable and tired. And that's not how it's supposed to go. It really does take a village to raise a child. And that village helps support the parents as well. And so the most important people in a child's life is not just all adults influence children. Now, we are the main caregivers, but my sister is very much involved in, and my mother and my other sister, very much involved in my daughter's life, and they're influencing her every day. My extended community is just as important as I am. And so to keep it short, I really just feel like the nuclear family is part of the problem. And if we start leaning into community, that doesn't mean don't get married, because I know people like to just not be nuanced about how they think about stuff. I'm not saying don't ever get married or whatever, but you don't have to center that relationship over everything else. You can say, I'm going to be married and I'm going to expand my circle, my community of care. And that way your child has so many people that they can lean on, and you have people that you can lean on, and the labor is less intense and everyone is much happier. Right now, ain't nobody happy.
Absolutely.
But the rich folks. And even they ain't happy.
I want to transition now to talk about how might we reclaim some of our parenting practices, but specifically through the lens of conscious parenting. So I want
Yeah.
to ask, just in general, for folks who may have never heard it before, what is conscious parenting, and how is this related
Yeah.
to decolonizing parenting?
So the way I got into conscious parenting is because I got into decolonizing my mind first. I realized that a lot of what how I was raised and a lot of how I was indoctrinated in education and just in general, just living and breathing in the United States was from a colonized mindset. And that's the first step, is recognizing that the colonizer lives up here. That's a big part of the colonialist like structures. Like we, of course, it's about land back when we talk about decolonizing, but also the reason it's mental. It's psychological warfare. And the whole point of colonialism is for us to destroy ourselves, destroy our families, destroy our communities. The point of colonialism is for us to self-destruct, right? And so what does that mean? That means that when we're raising our children and we're raising them violently, even though we see the science that says that when you raise a child in this way, they become more aggressive, more prone to be in jail, all these things, we still do it because it's what we know, right? And we don't understand that there's another way. We are self-destructing. Our kids start to self-destruct, our communities self-destruct. It's all connected. And so that's how I got into conscious parenting, because I realized at first it was like, okay, where do I go from here? I didn't know where to go. I read some books. They talked about gentle parenting. So I went in that community, but it was hella white and it was white led and it didn't feel like it was me. It also felt super child centered. And that sounds, I think in order to really support children, we got to support the parents. And I wasn't feeling like the parents were being supported well in the gentle parenting community. It was like, whatever you're feeling doesn't matter. Just do this, right? And it doesn't take into consideration the systemic issues that parents might be facing, their trauma, all that stuff. So conscious parenting really is, it still has the foundation of seeing your child as a whole human who is a whole autonomous human with agency, who you respect. That's the base of it. But at the end of the day, it's really about how I, as a parent, react to my child's behavior. It's not about their behavior. It's not about them. It's about me. It's about how I view their behavior, how I perceive their behavior, if I'm able to reframe it, how my trauma is showing up, how my day is impacting my parenting, how my socioeconomic status is impacting my parenting. You're conscious of the external influences that influence your parenting. That's all that means.
Wow. Thank you for breaking that down for us. But now I'm super curious, specifically about your own parenting journey, and how this kind of paralleled you kind of decolonizing your mind, as you mentioned earlier. How did you come to this to begin with? And if you don't mind, I just want to share a bit of an anecdote that you shared with us during our check-in. You mentioned that your feelings around children is like the total opposite versus how you used to feel about them like a while back. So tell us about that transition. Was there like a moment
I can stand kids.
crystallize that for you?
Yeah. I could not stand children. So I got pregnant at 36 years old. So before that, I had no intention of ever having children. I didn't like them. I wanted to be the bougie auntie that was traveling and getting them passport stamps, living in Belize. Okay. I have no intention of ever having children. I couldn't stand them, couldn't stand the sound of their joy. I didn't want to be around them. And so when I found out I was pregnant and I really let it sink in that I'm about to be somebody's mother, and most likely a single mom, because Gia's dad is in the picture, but we're just not together. And so I having to grapple with all these things, and I was just like, okay, I'm gonna be somebody's mother. Let me figure out how to do this. And so I started reading a lot of books while I was pregnant. And one of the books was Brain Rules for Baby, just talking about neuropsychology for infants and toddlers. And so that is what opened up the door for me to start seeking out different parenting practices. They talked about like what physical punishment does to a child's brain, how it affects the gray matter, all this stuff. And then once I went into the gentle parenting community, and I was not feeling welcome in any of the Facebook groups. It just felt like gentle white supremacy to me. I was like, I'm not happy here. So I sought out other, like Black groups, and it was full of respectability politics. And I was like, where is my people? Okay. So when I started looking for more Black people doing this, I ran into Akila Richards, who is an unschooler on social media, and she talked about like decolonizing, and I started looking into that, and that's what really just kind of radicalized me, because I was like, wow, like my mind is it's not just about not whooping. It's not just about treating your child with respect. It really is a whole lifestyle shift that obviously will influence your child and help you raise them in a nonviolent way. But really, it's raising, especially Black children, in a nonviolent, conscious environment is a radical, like, it's a radical thing. Like it's actually resistance against the status quo. That's how I think about it. Because if you think about all the issues that you may have had coming up, being raised by an old school parent, like I've had self-esteem issues, I've been in abusive relationships. All of this is because all that stuff felt like home, right? So if you think about like just giving your child this foundation of respect and kindness and graciousness, as well as lifting them up, uplifting them, and letting them advocate for themselves, use their voice, letting them make decisions. All this stuff is just creating an adult who will then grow up and be like, I'm not taking this from the government, from a partner, from a teacher, from an employer. Right. So it's not just, it's so much bigger than just, we want to think that our parenting is so personal. Like, this is my child. It's not. No, because your child is a community with mine. And so your parenting is a community endeavor. Even if you're not in community, your parenting affects the community. And so when you think about that and you think about what your parenting may send out into the world, how can you not be conscious about it? Did I even answer your question, though?
Man, you answered all the questions, Yolanda. I have to make up questions now. That was brilliant. I'm curious, did you notice any shifts in your own family dynamics and kind of personal relationships when you began this journey?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Everybody was confused. Everybody was like, "What are you doing? Like, what you mean you're not gonna whoop her? Like, but you?" And so I really, my niece is about to turn 18, and when she was a young child, like, we all raised her, like all my sisters and my mother, like we were just very, very involved in her life. So yeah, I even whooped her, right? That's extended family, be whooping kids.
Yeah.
And so my sister was like, "Wait a minute, so you whoop mine, but I can't whoop yours?" Absolutely right. You got it right. And it's not just because she's mine, it's because I've changed.
Right.
I've changed my outlook. And so I've definitely had to put up boundaries around how people can interact with her. And also my daughter is autistic. She is 6 years old now. She's has limited speech. And so that added another layer to the way I parented, because now I'm not just parenting like, just a typical child. Like, I have an autistic child who requires accommodations in my home and outside of home. And so I definitely had to put up a lot of barriers and boundaries in order to protect her from the old school paradigms and thinking. And I've had to enforce those a lot. But the amazing thing is, my family loves her. And so even though it might have been a struggle in the beginning to like listen to me, because I'm just be like, listen, either you do this or you just don't, and we don't see you. Like, that's just what we gonna do. I'm not subjecting my child to a certain type of behavior in order for you to be in her life. Like, you just won't be in her life. And so it never came to that. It was really just they tried, they failed, they tried, and then they finally started getting it right. And so anyone who's starting this and they're dealing with parents or extended family member that's talking mess, that got something to say all the time about their wild kids who probably need a whooping, you need some boundaries, because no one should feel safe threatening your child, No one should feel safe telling you how that you need to hit them. Like, they need to know, like, this is a boundary here. Now, you have the choice. You don't got to do it, but this is what's going to happen when you don't. Because people will test you. People will be talking mess. It's just not mainstream yet. And once it is, I don't know that it ever will be, to be honest with you, because people are so, there's a word called childism. And the childism is baked into our society, and it's part of all the isms. And if you look at things like racism and ableism, you look at the fact that what white people said when they were enslaving our ancestors was basically that they were children and they needed to be led. They needed to be enslaved because they needed to be told what to do.
Oh, Lossie, Miss Scarlett. What is it? Lossie, we've got to have a doctor. I don't know nothing about birthing babies.
You look at how people treat disabled people. They treat them like children, right? They infantilize them. And so when you think about the fact that children are always at the center of marginalization, because everyone treats, when you have a marginalization, it all comes back to being treated like a child. Women, they're being treated like children under patriarchy. Like, I'm the man. You can't make decisions because you don't have the brain capacity. That's how we treat children. And so the childism is so baked into our society. I'm not sure, just like with white supremacy and capitalism, patriarchy, that it will never fully go away, because there'll always be people who will fight against that going away. But what I do believe is that more people are seeing that children deserve our protection, that they are people, that they have a place in a society that is outside of the hierarchy. It's hard, but folks are coming around.
Absolutely. Wow. One thing I'm thinking about right now with regards to just the lack of agency children are afforded in this society, thinking about bodily autonomy. So typically we talk about with respect to like violence, like disciplinary violence. But I'm thinking about something in my own past. So I grew up with a huge family on both sides. So just on my dad's side, grandmother had 10 kids and they each had 3 kids and so on and so forth. And I can remember, family, please don't get mad when this comes out. I love y'all. I can remember going to family gatherings and there being this impetus for like forced affection, like go give so and so a kiss, and children really don't have the right to kind of, or at least they didn't have the right to kind of deny that in that context. I'm curious how that lands with you, just this notion of bodily autonomy for children and forced affection.
Yeah, I'm again more radical because I don't even think they need to say hi to you. I don't. We cannot force people to do things. Right? The only person you can control is yourself. So no, you should not be forcing your child. Manners is one thing, but forcing, especially because you got to think about, some people are undiagnosed. And so the touching, the being forced to speak, sometimes it can go into ableism very, very quickly. And so when it comes to forced affection, we're not doing that. I tell people, especially because my daughter has limited speech, and she can't say "put me down," right? She can't say "don't kiss me," so she talks with her body. She's doing this. She's wiggling out of your arms. Put her down. She's telling you she doesn't want to kiss. She's telling you, And so what I tell people all the time is, you're teaching lessons that you never intended to teach. So if I'm letting you, my daughter is doing this, pulling away from you, and I'm letting you force a kiss, that tells her that my voice, whatever that looks like, it doesn't matter, that adults are able to do with me as they please, and no one is going to protect me. The person who's supposed to protect me sat there and let it happen. And so I always ask people to think about, what are the lessons that you are teaching that you don't intend to teach when you do certain things? And is that something that you want for your child? Because at the end of the day, what we're talking about when it comes to autonomy is not just the body, it's the voice. If they say no and you say yes, you have just taught a big lesson. And that's why some kids, they end up being molested and they don't tell you, because they noticed that when they said, I don't want this person touching me. You advocated for the person to touch them.
Mhm.
So when something happens to them, you can't then be mad and be like, you should have said something to me. They did when it first happened, with the first hug, with the first kiss, and you said to let it happen. So what do we want? Do we want children who are going to advocate against and say to that person, don't touch me like that. Don't touch me here. I'm going to tell on you and feel protected when they do so? Or do we want people who are just going to be docile and allow things to happen to them because they know they're not protected? Which one? Because you can't have both ways.
Ooh. Thank you. Thank you for those bars, Yolanda.
It's always deeper. It's never just the affection. It's never, it's always deeper than that, because again, what a child internalizes about your actions is more important than your intent. Your intention is just to teach this child politeness and like family, like rules and whatever. But the impact is that you're teaching them that they do not matter.
Yes, indeed. Thinking about where else might these lessons kind of emanate from, and I'm thinking about the media sphere. So we mentioned this briefly earlier around Black comedians and how this stereotype of Black parenting and how it gets fixed in people's imaginations. With that said, I'm curious about your thoughts on just how Black parenting has been portrayed in TV and film and media at large, right? So some folks may look at My Wife and Kids, with Damon Wayans and say, oh, this is really funny. But others of us may see that as like actual verbal abuse, emotional abuse, manipulation.
Out of my house.
All right, if you don't want me in the house, I'll leave. I'll go get my clothes.
No, you don't have clothes. Everything you own is mine. As a matter of fact, take them pants off.
No, Michael,
pants back.
no.
All right, out of deference to your mother, you can keep the pants. But the rest of you got to go.
Or even thinking about the Bernie Mac's King of Comedy set, right? Very legendary bit that he did around those children. Some may think that it hasn't aged well at all. I'm curious, just any general thoughts on just the depiction of Black parenting in the media?
Yeah, it's harmful. It is. And but because of the way that a lot of Black folks deal with our trauma, we don't take things seriously. We make a joke out of everything, right? That's a way that we have been able to deal with our collective trauma. I like it and I love, I hate it and I love it at the same time, because we find ways to laugh and commiserate and get that and get some of that trauma out of us. But that said, we normalize abusive behavior a lot. Even on social media, people will be imitating Black mothers, because it's mostly mothers, and it's usually men imitating women in a wig, talking about they're imitating mothers. And it's always harsh. It's always punitive. It's always really negative and harmful. And so I'm always just like, why do we want to keep that alive? Why don't we see correlations between this is probably gonna get me in trouble.
Oh no, about trouble.
Why don't we see correlations behind what our first relationship is with the adults, the men, the parents in our lives, and the way that we then treat our partners, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm treading on. I'm trying not to say what I want to say, because people do not like this conversation. But you can't tell me that the very first relationship that you've had with the opposite gender, if it was really violent and negative, that does not affect how you view that gender and how you treat them.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that it's everything, because it's not, but it does influence. And so I think when we normalize really unhealthy behaviors, we just keep perpetuating the harm. It's just like, oh, haha, this is funny. But why is it funny to you? What's funny about abuse? Like, seriously, what's funny about talking about children and their intellect? Even like Kevin Hart, he have sets, he talk about his daughter being dumb.
Yeah.
I'm just like, why would you want your daughter to see this? Even if you think that she's just like, oh, this is funny, but you don't know how that's actually hitting her. You don't know how that actually, I'm sure you didn't get permission. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't understand the need to make children the most marginalized people the butt of a joke. And I don't understand why harming them and talking about whippings and the violence that they need is funny to adults.
Yeah.
It's very perverse, and it really just is. It gives colonizer vibes. It just does, because it doesn't make any sense to me. Anytime I see it, I turn the channel. I can't watch it.
Yeah. Well,
I'm the person that I'm seeing it, and you're sitting next to me, and I'm looking at you like, you like this?
mm-hmm.
This is funny to you?
Well, it makes me curious.
Yolanda ruins everything.
No, we need that. We got to disrupt these things where they're taking place. But it makes me curious. Are there any portrayals that make you say, like, hey, actually, we do need more of that, or this actually feels good to experience? Any TV shows, cartoons, anything like that?
Well, Bluey is a cartoon that everybody loves to watch because they portray the parents as actual people. Well, they're not people, but they portray the parents as like they're dogs, but they humanize them, because a lot of times it goes to the opposite end of the spectrum. I forget what. It's a show with one of the Tiara Tamara. I forget which one of it. I can't tell them apart. But they have a Netflix show.
Okay.
And they were talking about like gentle parenting and that, but they made it seem very, very permissive. Like all it is let's talk and sit down and have a thing. Your child does something that requires a consequence. Give them a consequence. It just doesn't have to be a violent consequence, right? We're not talking about permissiveness here. So I feel like whenever they portray the gentle parenting, conscious parenting community, they do that wrong. Because they're not actually talking to people who doing this. It's a writer who probably thinks they know about the environment and gets it wrong. It looks very permissive. It looks like a joke, and so people carry that negative stereotype too. So honestly, it's been the cartoons for me. Okay, Daniel Tiger.
Okay.
My daughter is obsessed with Daniel Tiger since she's been a baby. She's 6 years old. She loves some DT. Yeah. And what I had like this viral tweet one time, because I talked about how when I watch it with her, the parents actually help me a lot because they are conscious parents on the show, Daniel Tiger. So when they're talking to the kids, you can hear them saying things, and they're teaching the parents at the same time. So it's always been the cartoons, the kids' cartoons that are talking about social, emotional learning that also incorporate parents into it, where I've learned from, but not the adults, not the adult shows. Like they always getting something wrong. They never get it right.
Copy that. No, you're absolutely right. I find like media depictions of just progressive decolonial thinking and behavior in general tends to be like the butt of a joke. People don't take it seriously. Like, oh,
well, I mean that's on purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it's too radical. It's supposed to sound like so. It's supposed to sound so far over there that you're like, okay, like this is too much, right? Mm-hmm. It's too radical, and that's okay. Keep thinking that. Yeah. Now you see though the result, because everyone is talking about kids these days, and kids these days are the worst generation ever. Gen Alpha and Gen Z, the worst generation ever. Are they, or are they just not putting up with your shit no more? Are they just seeing the fact that this hierarchy that has been created by the white capitalist patriarchy is some BS, and they're just not willing to take it no more? Mm. And as we see all the students, protesting about like genocide, I always question like teachers and like the younger generations and the teachers in like elementary school and middle schools. What do you really want out of education? Because it's supposed to radicalize you, in my opinion. And so if you are just going along with the status quo, that makes sense because that's what education does. Mm-hmm. But if you are noticing kids are a little bit more resistant to being told what to do, I think that's a good thing. We have to adjust. We have to figure out how to deal with them, right? Because they're basically saying, I'm human and treat me like such. Mm-hmm. You can't talk to me any kind of way just because you're an adult. And I don't see anything wrong with that. Yeah. But we do as adults because of childism, because children are not supposed to challenge. And I put up on Twitter, side by side tweets about like the characteristics of fascism, characteristics of of colonialism, characteristics of old school parenting. And they are the exact same. And education is part of that. And so what are you perpetuating? What do you want these kids to learn? Because if you are just still stuck in this place where kids are to be seen and not heard and deserving of physical punishment, it's like fascism, y'all. I'm just telling you that right now, because it's the same characteristics.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much for drawing those parallels out for us. Can we actually use your tweet in this episode? Can we share that with
Yeah, I'll find it.
Okay.
I'll find it and send it to you. Folks were like, I never thought about that. Yeah, we have to start thinking about how all of this is. I have a friend, Dr. Sunjata, and he did this theory of indivisibility, and he taught me systems thinking around this and how everything is interconnected and interdependent, right? So we think that things are like A goes to B, goes to C, goes to D, when really it's A influences B, influences C, and so on and so forth. So all of these things are working together. The things that are happening politically, they are happening in our homes. We just are not. We're just not seeing it that way. The carceral mindset. A lot of us are walking around being the police to our children all day. We are our children's Gestapo, and we're not seeing how that is a mirror into the systems. We're also not seeing how the systems impact our ability to parent in a healthy way. You know, I try to tell people all the time, like, your inability to really grasp conscious parenting isn't a moral failure. It's a systemic one, because you're being set up to fail. You're being set up. Literally, they want us to die. And so when you think about the fact that nothing is set up as a safety net for parents, as a way for us to get, community and respite, of course, you're facing all these roadblocks. Of course, you're somebody who is overworked and underpaid and can barely keep a roof over their heads, are struggling right now with being conscious, because your brain can only take so much.
Absolutely.
So we got to see how all of it is working together.
Yes, indeed. We're going to transition to talk about these systemic factors and really try to speculate on the future, what the most liberatory future could look like for Black children. Before we do that, I just want to lift up a few other kind of media properties. Me and the producer team, we sat and we asked ourselves, like, do we have any kind of progressive depictions of Black parenting in the media that we gravitate towards? So you shared Daniel Tiger, and you also mentioned that some of the most progressive depictions are happening in cartoons and animation. So I just wanted to kind of lift up three films and TV series. Craig of the Creek, a wonderful producer, Lynn, really, really vibes with. Have to check that out. Also, you folks check that out as well. How do you feel about the Proud Family?
Proud Family is not conscious. I think they on the cusp. They're on the cusp of it.
Okay.
The father specifically got some misogyny happening, but the mother is more conscious than anything.
How do you feel? Well, have you seen Hair Love, the animated?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, how do you feel about that?
Oh, I love that. I love it. Yeah, that was. We went out and got the book once it came out too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a beautiful depiction. I mean, I think that there's a lot more, and mostly on social media. On social media, you can see all kinds of different types of family being conscious and loving on each other and sharing the joy and sharing just how it doesn't have to be so contentious parenting. You know, I feel like what media likes to put out there is that parenting is supposed to be so hard and the kids are so terrible. And it doesn't have to be that way. We have hard times. I'm a single parent raising an autistic child. I have ADHD. Every day is hard. But that it's not her. What's hard is me trying to exist and do all this by myself, right? And so there's so many things on social media, so many accounts of social media that I follow for the reason to uplift me. So I can look at them and be like, yes, I'm friends with people. And I've been able to through social media, become friends with people who parent this way. And it's just a way of life for them. They're not struggling anymore. They have fully made the transition over to conscious parenting. And I see the impact it's had on their children. It just makes me so happy and hopeful.
Yes, indeed. Well, I want to think through what sort of support do parents need, but on a societal level, because we often say that it takes a village. There's often this quote that we say children are our future, but I don't know.
Mhm.
It feels like in this country, we don't really invest in our kids' future that much.
We don't.
So many different systemic factors. The fact that kids can accrue debt for school lunch just seems insane to me.
Yeah.
My question is, how might we better invest in our children on the structural and societal level?
Yes. So we have to be active participants in our own liberation, right? So we have to intentionally seek out community for ourselves and for our children. Investigate these systems for ourselves, inside of ourselves, then our parenting, and then our community at large. So to me, it starts with, are you able to form community? And a lot of people are like, oh, it's so dangerous, and that's a big part of the indoctrination. Like the powers that be want us to fear each other so we can be holed up in our houses and buying things. Capitalism is at the heart of all of this stuff. Slave capitalism is at the heart of all of it. We have replaced community with consumerism. All the things that we think about that we buy to make our lives easier, that's to replace the village members. Okay. And so we got to start actively looking for village members and start thinking of the ones that we already have. Like, I think of my daughter's teachers and therapists as village members, as people that I can even turn to when I need help or advice. So we got to stop looking at some of the people in their lives as adversaries. A lot of teacher parent adversarial stuff happening right now, and it's really annoying. I'm just like, we all want what's best for the kids, right? Like, let's work together. And so we gotta seek out intentional community, but we also gotta think about how we are engaging in community, what we are modeling about community, and how we're using our political power, our buying power, because all of that again is it matters. We have to look at systemically how we are playing a part in the systems, and how we have to work with other parents to start breaking some of this stuff down in our local community. So like joining your PTA, joining what is it called? Like going to city council meetings, going to school, even if you homeschool. If you don't think of every child as your child, you're going to be like, oh, I'm homeschooling. It doesn't matter. I'm in my bubble. That's not community minded. Even if you homeschool your child, you should still care about the education of other children and be going to school. What do they call it? The school district meeting thingies, if you can, right? So like, we got to get more involved in the lives of children in general, and then really try to make intentional communities amongst other adults.
Absolutely. I just got two more questions for Yolanda, related to your response. If you were the head of the Department of Education, and let's say you could pass anything you wanted to shape this government, what major large-scale changes just in our governance structure? You mentioned capitalism earlier. I'm thinking about healthcare. I'm thinking about everything, right? So not even just limited to education. What would you change in this government to allow conscious parenting to proliferate?
Billionaires would not exist, and it would be free housing for everybody. And the thing is, and a UBI, because if the weight of capitalism weighs us all down. Again, the cruelty is always the point, right? And so how can we expect people to be the best parent in the world when they can't even afford to pay rent? Like, it just doesn't make sense. So we need to meet people's basic needs: healthcare, rent, and a universal basic income, and abolish billionaires. Because why are you here? Why is there not a maximum wage at this point? We see how detrimental it is to the world. But if we are speaking specifically about education, we need to be letting these kids lead some of that, if not all of it, because we don't know. To put a bunch of kids into a room and be like, here you go, learn the same, does not make sense. And expecting them to learn the same at the same rate, it doesn't make logical sense to me.
Yeah.
And so if we're able to make it a more like democratic sort of environment, so kids can explore and look at how are the best ways that I learn. A lot of folks demonize things like video games, but kids are learning so much via video games.
Mhm.
And if we just change, it's called a schoolish mindset. That's what Akilah calls it, Akilah Richards. If you think about the schoolish mindset and how it says like kids can only learn if someone is teaching at them, right? An adult is up here and you're down here,
Yeah.
you're looking up at them and they're talking to you. When learning happens everywhere, all the time, it's all around us.
Mhm.
And if you look at learning and education in that capacity, you see how limited we have with these kids, but we also start to see how the carceral system and the capitalistic system has infiltrated education because they got stuff like silent lunches. They got these kids walking down hallways with their hands behind their backs silently.
Carson.
They do that in prisons.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it doesn't make any sense. Like but actually it does if you think about the goal of compulsory education, which is to create more workers. It's not teachers. Most of them, if they are teaching to transgress, they get in trouble. Like so, it's not a place where critical thought and individualism of my individual thoughts thrive. It is a place where you are made to conform. And so what I would do is be like, let's get rid of these buildings. Let's figure out, because buildings look like prisons too.
Yeah.
And so like, let's get rid of these buildings. Let's figure out how to get outside more, and let's let children figure out how they learn best and find people to help teach them in that way. Because I know that that's a hard concept, but we got teachers who are in classroom with 30, 40 students. Like, there's no way for that to be a thriving environment. So we just have to, to me, education has to fall along with all the other systems. They're all detrimental to our children, all of them, because they don't have the children at the center of it. They have adults' needs at the center of it all.
Yes, indeed. Yes, we need to center the perspectives and experiences of children, not only within education, but just community at large. And stop treating education as an assembly line factory just to produce.
Well, that's what it was for. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one last question for you, Yolanda. For folks who are beginning their parenting journey, what do you suggest in terms of resources that they look into? And where might our guests or our audience, find more about your work?
Yeah. So there's a lot of people online now, a lot of Black parent educators now. And I'm happy to know all of them, most of them. And so if you go on, Instagram or TikTok, there's a lot of people who you can seek out to find the information, and somebody who maybe, because I'm a bit radical. I'm not even gonna lie about that. Okay. I know that some of the stuff I probably said, you're probably just like, oh, my ears are off now because it's too much. But I am this way because I got really far deep into decolonizing. There are people who are just like, let me just help you get started. There's so many people that you can now seek out this information. And my whole thing is start looking at neuroscience. I don't have a whole bunch of degrees, but what I did do was look at how my perception of my child was not the truth. Adults think they know what children are thinking and doing, but we forget that their executive functioning is not fully developed until like 25. And so we have to be mindful of just child development. If you look up a child development books, start seeking out people who talk about child development, who talk about logical and natural consequences. If you are following someone who does talk about physical punishment, or if you don't get advice from people who also whip their kids, like that's a big one for people. They'll start to transition to conscious parenting, but they're still complaining to and trying to get advice from people who are not aligned with that. You got to find your people. I have a group. It's called Conscious Parenting for the Culture on Facebook. It's about 18,000 Black parents only. I'm playing with y'all. We only do Black parents up in there, and we that's where you can go to ask the questions. It does not matter where you're at on the journey. You are safe there to ask the questions, so you can learn more about it. It's heavily moderated. We don't play up in there. If you start talking about hitting kids, you get kicked out because we want this to be a safe space to discuss conscious parenting and not punitive parenting. So again, it's Conscious Parenting for the Culture on Facebook. That's a big resource for people. I also usually do like a yearly conference around conscious parenting. I'm having one with my girl, Supernova Mama. That's her @ on Twitter. And we are talking about conscious parenting and neurodiversity because a lot of our children are neurodiverse. So that's happening in July. And then you can find me on my website, parentingdecolonized.com. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. My Facebook page got stolen recently, unfortunately. I got scammed out of my Facebook page. 144,000 likes gone, and Meta won't do anything about it. But so I'm not necessarily on there under that banner. I'm on there under my. I bought some land recently, so I'm under there under my I'm trying to build a family farm restoration center. It's called Wild and Free Family Farm because I just bought 3 acres of land out here and I'm converting it to a food and land sovereign workshop restoration area. Yeah. Out here in Arkansas.
Okay. Thank you for lifting up all that wonderful, brilliant work that you're involved with, Yolanda. We gotta have you back to talk about the what is it called? The Wildflower Family Farm?
It's called Wild and Free Family Farm, and I'm doing a lot. My goal is to basically have a little tiny village up in there for Black single mothers, so we can help each other raise our kids, but also a place for rest and restoration for Black families. You pull an RV up in there and do some camping, and we have workshops and events and a community garden and a place for the kids can play. I'm trying to make it a space that is just free from the BS of the outside world. So
yes, indeed.
Coming soon.
Intentionally building community. Thank you so much for everything that you shared with us, all your wonderful breadth of experience, your knowledge. We really appreciate you taking time to share this with us, Yolanda.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, and we definitely got to have you back. So thank you. That was Yolanda Williams, conscious parenting coach and founder of Parenting Decolonized. To learn more about the incredible work she's leading, visit parentingdecolonized.com. And remember, children are humans too. How might you help ensure the children in your own life, or even your own inner child, are liberated and emotionally grounded? And how might you help ensure the parents in your own life are supported and loved? Let us know when you share this episode on your social media. And be sure to tag us at We Are PushBlack on IG and TikTok. At PushBlack, we agree with Marcus Garvey when he said, a people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. We believe telling empowering stories on Black life and history can build a more liberated Black future. Being here with us lets us know you probably feel like that's important too. You matter. Your choice to be here matters. It lets us know that you value this work, and you make PushBlack happen with your contributions at blackhistoryyear.com. Most people do $5 or $10 a month, but everything makes a difference. Thank you for supporting the work.